Morning. That was a great setup for Song of Solomon, wasn't it? Yeah, great song for that. Well, our theme for the year has been building godly families, and here lately we've been focused in the Song of Solomon. We've been talking about godly romantic interest, godly courting, godly dating. We saw last week where Solomon and the Shulamite got married, and so I hope that this has been really helpful and edifying, and maybe you've never really studied Song of Solomon before, and here's one perspective on that. I hope that it's glorifying to God. Well, we saw this beautiful, ornate wedding last week between Solomon and the Shulamite, and what most Hollywood stories and what the fairy tales do is they ride off into the sunset. Everything was perfect. Never a problem did they have, and they lived happily ever after. And what I love about Song of Solomon is that's not what happens here. And we're going to see that this morning. So if you would, go ahead and turn over to Song of Solomon chapter 4, please. I'm in Ezekiel for some reason, so let's go over to Song of Solomon chapter 4. Song of Solomon chapter 4. And what I really appreciate about the section that we're going to cover this morning is that we're really going to talk about the realities of even godly marriage, the realities of godly marriage. And this morning what I want to do is cover a big section of the text, a big section of text. And there's a lot of individual details that we would be very well served by looking at every single one of them. But just for time's sake and for us to see the overarching storyline, we're not going to get too bogged down in the details. And so this morning, I want to break it into three very clear, big overall movements that'll sort of keep us in line with what the overarching storyline is. So the first movement of the storyline that we're going to notice in chapter 4 is the consummation of the marriage. That's the first movement that we're going to look at this morning. We're going to get a really intimate view of this couple on their wedding night as they consummate their marriage. We're going to see that the man does most of the speaking in this movement, and there's a lot of imagery and a lot of metaphors that are used that, frankly, if you think that this is a literal description of his bride, it would be a terrifying picture. It would not be something that's pretty. There's a bunch of metaphors and imagery that we would not use today and probably don't use today. But then again, if we were back in that time period and we use some of our imagery, they'd probably think, that was weird. What are you talking about? So while we're not going to get into all of the details this morning, please notice with me, especially we're going to read a big section here, how sincere, how detailed, and how tender he is with his bride. So let's read from verse 1 down to verse 15. Verse 1 down to verse 15. Here Solomon says to his bride on their wedding night, "How beautiful you are, my darling, how very beautiful. Behind your veil, your eyes are doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats streaming down from Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn sheep coming up from washing, each one bearing twins, and none has lost its young. Your lips are like a scarlet cord. Your mouth is lovely. Behind your veil, your brow is like a slice of pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, constructed in layers. 1,000 shields are hung on it, all of them shields of warriors. Your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle that feed among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I will make my way to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense." Look at verse 7. "You are absolutely beautiful, my darling. There is no imperfection in you. Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Descend from the peak of Amana, from the summit of Senir and Hermon, from the dens of the lions, from the mountains of the leopards. You have captured my heart, my sister, my bride." Your translation might say, "My heart beats faster. You've made my heart beat faster, my sister, my bride. With one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How delightful your caresses are, my sister, my bride. Your caresses are much better than wine, and the fragrance of your perfume than any balsam. Your lips drip sweetness like the honeycomb, my bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. My sister, my bride, you are a locked garden and a sealed spring. Your branches are a paradise of pomegranates with choicest fruits, henna with nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, and with all the trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all of the best spices. You are a garden spring, a well of flowing water streaming from Lebanon." There's a ton there, isn't there? And these are some beautiful poetic descriptions that the man is giving to his wife, his bride, before they consummate the marriage. And please remember, all the way back from chapter 1, The Shulamite is a woman who had some deep insecurities about her appearance. You remember that? Her deep, dark tan from working out in the vineyards. And so I think it's so wonderful that before Solomon ever touches her with his hands, he touches her with his words. These are sincere, true, just beautiful images and metaphors that he's giving to make her feel secure, to make her feel safe in what's going to be a very vulnerable situation. And so it's a really beautiful thing. He wants her to be at ease and to be safe with him. And one big focus from this entire section is, please notice, there is not one thing that is crude. There's not one thing that's dirty or wrong or gross in any kind of way. These are beautiful, heartfelt compliments that he's making to her right before they consummate their marriage. Now, this is a beautiful thing here, and there's so many good ones. I want to point out one that's my favorite, because it's not just her physical appearance, although he's definitely admiring her physical appearance. It's not just that. Verse 4, down in verse 4, he says her neck is like the Tower of David with 1,000 warrior shields on it. So is he saying, girl, you got the biggest neck I've ever seen? No, he's not doing that. He's not doing that. And in that time period, if you think of somebody who is stiff-necked, that's an insult about their character and the kind of person that they are. But here, her neck is like the Tower of David. It's fortitude. It's a stronghold. You look at it and you admire it. So what he's doing is he's praising her for the way that she carries herself. She's a dignified person with integrity and character, and he loves that about her. And so that's one of my favorites here. Down in verse 8, he says, come with me, come with me. It's emphasized twice. He's not just thinking about himself. He's not just thinking about, I'm going to get what I want out of this. It's their togetherness. It's them experiencing this together as a married couple. And it's the first time that he calls her his bride. And he's going to continue to call her that throughout the rest of the song. And where he says, my sister, my bride, a couple of times, we probably don't do that. Maybe you do, but we probably don't do that. We're like, oh, that's a little weird. Well, in the time period, it wasn't weird at all. To call your bride my sister this is a lifelong family relationships that we have for the rest of our life. It was a very loving and tender thing to say. My sister, my bride. He's saying, I'm going to love you forever, the way that he says that. And so it's a really beautiful thing. And probably one of my other favorites before we keep going. But verse 9, I love verse 9. He says, with just one look of your eyes, you make my heart beat faster. That's all it takes. Just one look and you've captured my heart, my sister, my bride. Beautiful stuff here. And so one application I want to pull out from this section before we even continue on is, for those who are married especially, notice your spouse and express yourself. Notice your spouse and express yourself. Now, since it's the man speaking in chapter 4, let's talk to the men specifically here for just a second. Maybe you're a guy and you don't like poetry. Okay? Sorry about Song of Solomon, by the way. There's a lot of it here. But notice how many things that he notices about her. And for guys who maybe you need to be reminded, hey, I got a haircut, you didn't say anything. I got my nails done and you didn't say anything. I got this new outfit, you didn't say anything. Let's try really hard to notice our spouses, to notice things about them, and don't just notice it, but communicate it. Say it out loud. Say, wow, you look great today. I love what you did with your hair. Something's different. Maybe you don't know what it is. Something's different. And let's just say, you were supposed to leave about 8 minutes before you left this morning, but she comes around the corner. Wow, she looks great. Tell her that. And specifically from this as well, it's not just about physical appearance, but about character and integrity. So whatever those specific things are that you adore about her, let's just say, man, you're just so kind to people. And I saw the way that you were talking to somebody who was new here today, and I just love that about you. That's one of those things that made me fall in love with you in the first place. Write that one down. It's great. Notice things and actually express yourself to your spouse. Now, it was the man talking to the woman, but let's reverse it the other way. Women, notice your husband and express yourself to your husband. Here it was a lot of physical appearance. We're going to see this later too, a little bit later. But if he comes out and he's looking pretty good today, tell him, you're looking handsome. Guys don't get compliments the way that women do, so it might mean a lot. But again, not just physical appearance, but also integrity and character. Wow, I love the way that you treated so-and-so, or you do such a good job of taking care of our family in XYZ area. Notice your spouse and express yourself. That's a beautiful application that we get just from this chapter alone. Now, when we come down to verses 12 through 15, back to the text here, verses 12 through 15, Solomon compares the Shulamite to a locked garden and a garden spring. What he's talking about is the purity of her sexuality that she's been so concerned with in chapters 1 up to chapter 4. We've talked about that a lot. He's praising her for that, and really he's talking about the purity of her sexuality, and it's about to advance to the consummation of the marriage. So let's read her response to that, and then we'll see the next actions that take place. So in verse 16 and chapter 5, verse 1, please. The Shulamite says, "Awaken, north wind, come, south wind, blow on my garden and spread the fragrance of its spices. Let my love come to his garden and eat its choicest fruits." And Solomon says, "I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride." Some translations render it like this: "I've gathered my myrrh with my spices. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I've drunk my wine with my milk." And then, at the end of chapter 5, verse 1, there's this outside person that speaks. Outside narrator says, "Eat, friends, drink, be intoxicated with caresses." Fascinating stuff. So she invites him to come to his garden and enjoy the fruit of her garden. And in chapter 5, verse 1, they consummate the marriage. Because you've got some of that past tense. I have come to my garden, I have gathered, I have eaten, I have drunk. But who's the person speaking at the end of verse 1? It doesn't seem to be Solomon or the Shulamite, because this is someone talking to them. They're consummating their marriage, so there's nobody else in the room. Who is the one that is inviting them to enjoy this? Who is it? And what's even cooler, before I even answer that, what I think anyway, is in the Song of Solomon, these words, this phrase, is directly in the middle of the entire song. And if you know anything about ancient Hebrew poetry, not all the time, but oftentimes, the main point is in the very middle of the poetry. So who is this one who is approving of what they're doing and inviting them to enjoy it, and what may be one of the main points of the entire Song of Songs? I think this is the voice of God himself. And he's inviting them to enjoy it. And so a point from that just has to be made from this is that God delights in his design for marriage being fulfilled. God takes delight in his design, following his design. It's a beautiful thing. He's telling to them, it's good, enjoy it. He's delighted by this. He approves it. It's pure. There's nothing dirty. There's nothing wrong with what's going on, because his design is fulfilling his design for marriage. That's a wonderful thing. And so, if anyone takes marital intimacy to be something that's crude or dirty or too erotic to talk about with the church, brethren, take it up with God. Because here we see God delights in his design, fulfilling their design. And I love that. Now here is where the fairy tales and the Hollywood stories that we sort of started with, this is where they stop. And they say they never had an argument, they never had any problems, everything was hunky-dory, sunshines and rainbows for the rest of their life. And then the chorus is singing in the background. Well, let's look at the next big movement overall in the Song of Solomon, because what comes next is consternation within the marriage. Now, consternation, if I can even say it right, it's a feeling of worry or anxiety or distress or confusion. So if someone is filled with consternation, it's distressing. It's something that's worrying. It's something that's not what you expected it to be. And so here we're going to see that even within the ideal romantic and sexual love between a husband and wife here in Song of Solomon, there's a very real worry, a very real distressing time that comes upon them where it's not all sunshine and rainbows that they imagined it to be. So let's continue reading and let's see what it was like for them. Look at chapter 5 and let's start in verse 2 and go down to verse 8. Chapter 5, verse 2 to verse 8. The Shulamite speaking here, she says, "I was sleeping, but my heart was awake. A sound, my love was knocking. So the man says, 'Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is drenched with dew, my hair with droplets of the night.' The Shulamite says, 'I've taken off my clothing. How can I put it back on? I've washed my feet. How can I get them dirty?' My love thrust his hand through the opening, and my feelings were stirred for him. I rose to open for my love. My hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with flowing myrrh on the handles of the bolt. I opened to my love, but my love had turned and gone away. My heart sank because he'd left. I sought him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. The guards who go about the city found me. They beat and they wounded me. They took my cloak from me, the guardians of the walls. Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, if you find my love, tell him that I am lovesick." So this is the next snapshot that we're looking at here. This is certainly not the night after the wedding night. Likely some time has gone by and they've been married for just a little bit. And just from what we've seen in Song of Solomon, what would you expect the next snapshot to be? You'd probably expect the next one to be, and their love got even deeper than before. They were even closer than they ever could have been before. Or maybe, let's have a baby. Let's start planning a family. That's not what happens. There's a problem that arises, and that's even in this ideal and sort of idealized view of what romantic and sexual love between a husband and wife looks like. It's unrealistic to pretend that problems don't arise. It's unrealistic to say that challenges won't come up before. It's almost like the spring of their romance is gone and it's replaced by apathy or indifference, at least on the part of one spouse. Now, this could be another dreamlike sequence because it says she was sleeping but her heart was awake, or maybe she's half awake or half asleep. But she hears her love knocking at the door. He's knocking at the door. Now, what have we seen her do in Song of Solomon previously? When he knocks, she's lifted her spirits and she's going to the door just as fast as she can because she can't wait to see him. But that's not what happens. She doesn't come right to the door. And so he says, open for me, my love. He calls for her to open up the door. And he says, my sister, my darling, my dove, my perfect one. Nowhere else in the entire Song of Solomon does he address her with this many terms of endearment all at one time. So it's very loving. It's very specific to her. He's calling out to her. And he's very loving, very specific, but he probably has physical marital intimacy on the mind. Maybe it's been raining, maybe he's been working, and so he's opened the door. I just want to share some love with you. But she still doesn't come to the door yet. This is very different than what we've seen in the song up to this point. And also, he's the king, isn't he? Couldn't he just, I'm the king, I'm coming in here. But he doesn't do that. He chooses not to do that. Her response in verse 3, I think, is a very realistic picture of what happens in marriage after you've been married for a while. At some point, the intense infatuation goes down. Those heightened feelings, that spring of romance sort of gets, I know the right word for it, plain. It's just a realistic picture of what happens. She says, I already took off my clothes. How can I put them back on again? I've already washed my feet. How can I get them dirty again? Maybe a modern equivalent of that would be, I already took off my makeup. I got ready for bed. Maybe my hair's in rollers. I'm tired. No, we're not doing this. And by the way, I see the smiles and stuff, so you know what I'm talking about. So where before, for the Shulamite woman, I mean, she couldn't wait to go open the door and go see him. She was so excited about consummating their marriage. Well, now there's a little bit of apathy, maybe some indifference towards him based on the normalcy and the regular routines of being married and married life. And before we even go on, I want to highlight a principle that is so important from this, is that even in this ideal romantic and sexual love and marriage here, problems and challenges will arise. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Differences will show themselves. There will be frustrations. Even in this greatest song that's ever been written, it's unrealistic to think that problems won't show up. And that's very encouraging for me. So if you're married, you've been married, you had problems, you have problems in your marriage, join the club. You're in pretty good company here in the most idealized version of marriage here. And so the way that we respond to those challenges, the way that we respond to those problems is what makes all the difference. And I think we're going to have a pretty good example here. Let's look at how the couple responds to this in this section. The man extends his hand through the opening, and he leaves something on the latch handle, or on the handle of the bolt there. And she's thinking about what she just said. She's thinking about the way that she just treated him, and she feels bad. So she goes to the door, and she's going to open the door for him. When she touches that latch or the bolt, it says her hands dripped with myrrh. She could feel something, and she could smell something for sure. It's sort of weird for us today, but they say that in the ancient world, sometimes they would anoint a door or a latch handle with ointment or perfume. And it would be a sign that, hey, I've been here and I love you and I'm calling out to you. And so instead of the man blowing up in a fit of anger because he doesn't get what he wants right away, he puts a little love note on the handle. And then he gives her the space that he thinks that she wants. And so when she feels bad about it, she goes to the door and she touches that handle. She can feel it, she can see it, she can smell the sweet smelling smells of this love note that he left for her. And oh man, now does she feel bad? She feels even worse than she felt before. He left a love note for me. So she opens the door and he's not there. So now she feels even worse. And this could be a dream sequence again. Maybe it's not a literal account, but she goes out searching for him. And where before the guards had helped her to find her love previously, now it says they beat her and they wounded her. Again, maybe not literally, but it's definitely the pain of emotional separation between a husband and wife as they're trying to search for each other. She was calling out for him and he wouldn't answer. And so she calls out to the daughters of Jerusalem for help. If you find my love, tell him that I'm lovesick. Tell him that I'm lovesick. And I hope that where she says, I'm lovesick, sparks something in your Song of Solomon brain. Because in chapter 2, verse 5, she said she was lovesick. But there, it was these intense feelings and just desiring Solomon and wanting to be with him. But now she's lovesick, and it's hurt, and it's pain. And she really regrets the way that she treated him, and she regrets that they are apart right now. And so one of the things that I want to point out about how both people responded to this problem, how both of them responded to the challenge, is that at some level, they actually both respond with loving humility to each other. They respond with loving humility. And the man did not say, woman, I'm your husband, this is my right, and we're doing this. He doesn't say that. He gives her the space that he thinks that she wants. And the woman on her part does not say, you're a grown man, you better get over it. Deal with it. She doesn't say that. Neither one of them are so hard-hearted or so proud that they just blow up in a fit of anger. And he leaves a love note. He leaves a love note on the door, even though he doesn't get what he wants from her right away, and gives her the space that he thinks she wants. And she's not so calloused that she just hurt his feelings. She's not so callous that she says, well, he'll get over it. We'll get back together another day. No, she goes out and she goes and searches for him. Now, the problem hasn't been settled yet. There's still a problem. There's still a challenge at hand. But both of them are open to fixing it. They're both trying to do what they think is right, even if they didn't do exactly what's right. There's a problem, and they don't want it to linger. They want to fix it. So it doesn't deny that problems exist, but both of them are open to settling it and trying to be closer than before. Now, this leads us to the last movement this morning that we're going to look at in the storyline, which is conversation about the spouse. Because remember, the woman has just called out to the daughters of Jerusalem, hey, if you find my love, tell him I'm lovesick. Help me search for him. Well, they're going to respond with a very legitimate question about her man. Why are we searching? Well, let's just read it. Look at chapter 5, verse 9. We'll read down to verse 16. This is the last section this morning. The daughters of Jerusalem respond and say, what makes the one that you love better than another, most beautiful of women? What makes him better than another that you would give us this charge? The Shulamite says, my love is fit and strong, notable among 10,000. His head is purest gold. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside flowing streams, washed in milk and set like jewels. His cheeks are like beds of spice, mounds of perfume. His lips are lilies dripping with flowing myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with beryl. His body is an ivory panel covered with lapis lazuli. His legs are alabaster pillars set on pedestals of pure gold. His presence is like Lebanon, as majestic as the cedars. His mouth is sweetness. He is absolutely desirable. Look at this. This is my love, and this is my friend, young women of Jerusalem. So in this last movement that we're going to talk about this morning, the Shulamite has a conversation with the other young ladies of Jerusalem, with the daughters of Jerusalem, about her husband. And they're sort of asking a very logical question. What's so great about your man that we should go help you? What's the big deal? Or what makes him any better than somebody else that you would make us swear to you or that you give us this charge? What's the big deal? Now, here's a golden opportunity for the woman, right? What's so great about your man about anybody else? Golden opportunity for her to say, girls, let me tell you about my man. You right? Yeah. And she's got a golden opportunity to say, he's just so impatient. He makes me feel so bad because he only wants what it's a great opportunity, right? She can say whatever she wants to. Solomon's not there. She can say whatever she wants. But what's so wonderful about this section, as she thinks about her man and thinks about this question, the only thing that she can is express admiration for him. As she's thinking about him, that's the only thing that she can do. She says a lot about his physical appearance, but it's not just his physical appearance. She says that he's notable or outstanding among 10,000 in verse 10. Down in verse 15, Your translation might say his presence or his appearance is like Lebanon, like the cedars of Lebanon. It could be an appearance thing to say he's tall, but some commentators suggest it's another reputation, a character thing. He's like the best cedar, tall and towering over people. He's dignified. He's got this character and integrity about him too. But I really love verse 16. His mouth is full of sweetness. He speaks tenderly and kindly to her. In verse 16, it's almost like she's run out of things to say. He's absolutely desirable to me. He's wholly desirable to me. Everything about him is desirable to me. And the end of verse 16, my favorite part. This is my beloved. This is my love. And this is my friend. It's the exact same Hebrew word that Solomon uses for her over and over again. So maybe a better idea is, this is my darling partner companion. That's who my man is. So she answers the question, and she just goes off on this wonderful thing. Now, whenever I was younger and I would hear particularly older people say, yeah, my spouse is my best friend, I was like, they don't play in the dirt with you. That doesn't make any sense. You don't know what a best friend is. But now, here we go. Now that I've been married to, sorry ladies, the most wonderful woman on the planet, I understand she's my best friend. I totally understand that. And even in what I just said about Caitlin there for a second, I think this gets us to one of the main points of this section. And that is that appreciation can reawaken or awaken love. Because here, she just shows her appreciation. Before, for the Shulamite, when Solomon's knocking on the door and saying, open, my love, my sister, my darling, all those things had gotten a little stale maybe. She wasn't really thinking about him the way that she did before. Maybe the spark had gone away, the spring of romance was gone, but now she has this opportunity to really think about her man. What makes him any better than anybody else? And she lists off all these things that she adores about him, those things that she appreciates about him, and you just can't help but notice, I mean, she's very passionate as she's saying this. It's reawakening her love for them. She has an opportunity to tell them all the bad things about Solomon, which he probably has some. But as she's thinking about it, all she can do is express appreciation for him. But I also want to bring another point to this, because this conversation could have gone very differently, couldn't it? This could have been a very different conversation. And so the last point I want to bring up is that, especially for spouses, your behavior will determine the speech of your spouse. Yes, when you're together, but especially when there's emotional distance between the two of you. When you the man's character here, the way that he treated her, let's just think about it. If the way that he treated the Shulamite were different and he did not treat her well, how do you think this conversation goes with the daughters of Jerusalem? Probably not very well, right? She's probably going to say, he makes me feel so awful about myself. He only thinks about himself. He's selfish. He doesn't do anything. He's just the worst. And that could turn this beautiful section of appreciation where she's longing for him even more into a, you know what, maybe I don't even need him. Maybe I don't even want to see him again. So the way that we behave to our spouse is going to determine the way that they talk about us. Yes, when we're together, but even more so when there's emotional distance. And that is a really important thing for us to notice. So if we treat our spouses well, then likely appreciation will be built up. And even if they're mad, they're going to have to say, well, yeah, maybe I did act this way. But if we treat them poorly and there's very little to appreciate, then in those really difficult times of emotional separation, that's going to change the way their conversations go entirely. So the way that we treat our spouses is so, so important. So important. Now that's where we're going to stop in Song of Songs this morning. This is good stuff, isn't it? I love it. It's very, very edifying, very helpful for me, for sure. The problem here has not been solved, but they're both open to solving the problem, and they're seeking each other, and we'll see that in a couple of weeks. Now, as we close this morning, I do want to connect this to Jesus by way of analogy. Over in Revelation chapter 3 and verse 20, specifically, Jesus is talking to a congregation in Laodicea. And one of the things that he says, Revelation 3 verse 20, is, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him, and he will dine with him, and he with me." Now, specifically, again, he's talking to a congregation in Laodicea, and specifically about them, they were a lukewarm group of people. They would not fully commit to Jesus. They were a lukewarm congregation there, and he's wanting them to open the door and receive him. Now, not in the exact same way, but Jesus stands at the door and knocks for us, just like Solomon did toward the Shulamite in our text this morning. And he longs for us to open the door and receive him and let him in. We can be so apathetic and so indifferent to who Jesus is that we act like the Shulamite and we say, no. And we don't answer the knock immediately. But maybe we answer the knock. We feel bad, and maybe at one point we answer the knock. And that's a great thing. But so often we can be so apathetic and indifferent. And thankfully, the opportunity to respond to Jesus knocking on the door, wanting a relationship with us, is still available today. But one day there will come a point where the opportunity is no longer available. It's a very real thing that we have to know. And so how are we going to respond to Jesus knocking the door and asking for a relationship with us? Now, if you want to learn about Jesus and want to know why the door is worth opening, we would love to study the scriptures with you. Or if you know that this is the best, when people ask, what's so great about your guy compared to everybody else, we've got a whole list if you want to talk about Jesus. And you understand that, and you need to open the door, receive him, and join him in covenant relationship, we've got water, and we would love to do that. Or maybe it's just like the picture we saw in Song of Solomon, which is at one point your relationship with the Lord was in the height of emotional readiness and very passionate about him. But over time, his knock at the door doesn't have the same impact on you. And so you say, no, not today. And so if there's anything that you need, we can assist you in any way in your relationship with Jesus, there's an opportunity now while together we stand and while we sing.